Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 29 of Typewriter Talks. I am Maureen McDole, the founder and executive director of Keep St. Pete Lit. We are a literary arts organization based in St. Petersburg, Florida. And Typewriter Talks is a weekly series where we get into the heads of local Tampa Bay writers. And today we have children's books author and illustrator Erica Sirotich. Did it? Yes.
Got it.
Erica's a double whammy. A lot of children's books, they're either children's books authors or they're illustrators, but you're both.
Yes.
So how long have you been writing children's books?
I've been writing for about 4 or 5 years. Illustrating a little longer. I got my agent in 2014 and illustrated my first picture book shortly thereafter. But writing kind of evolved after the illustrating.
Okay. And what are you working on right now?
Right now, so I'm looking forward to, in December, a little series of board books with HarperCollins called Let's Say. Board books are, as you know, the little chunky block books for babies and toddlers. And this series is super simple. It's just a word or a phrase in different languages, and I illustrated. This series I didn't write, I actually just illustrated them. It's the first one that comes out is Let's Say I Love You, and you see scenes from all different cultures and the phrase I love you in different languages. And then that comes out in December, and then we have one coming out in the spring, Let's Say Hello. Very simple again. So that's what I'm anticipating. But right now I am on maternity leave.
Yeah, baby. You have a new baby.
Yeah. So she actually just turned 6 months.
What age?
Just flew by.
Yeah.
So I'm on a bit of a hiatus. I've still been doodling and writing down ideas and kind of starting to try to develop manuscript ideas again, but I've been on a bit of a break.
Yeah, well, not that COVID's a blessing, but you've gotten to be in this kind of bubble with your baby. And
it really changed what we envisioned the first year would be like. Yeah.
She was born, was it March? Was she born in March? Or
born in April, and like the quarantine started in about March. So yeah, it was weird. The last month of the pregnancy, everything was like, oh my God. And yeah, so we've definitely been in a bubble. She hasn't really met anybody. She hasn't, we've seen a couple family members like in the backyard and stuff, but it's been weird.
Yeah, my neighbor downstairs, she's baby Teddy's, he's almost a year, but it's like we're in the same building. We were quarantined together, and then it was a little like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. But it's like, this baby's there and I can't touch him. It's like, they walk outside the door and I'm like, I have to hold you. And I know.
It's so hard. Like the couple of times I've seen my parents, it's been like across the yard or whatever. And like the last time I saw my dad, he was like, just let me hold my granddaughter. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know what you've been doing. So,
where you've been, Dad. So how do you come up with your themes? Is it your idea or is it your publisher's idea?
Well, for books that I have both written and illustrated, they're definitely my ideas. Most of my books and most of my topics deal with animals in some way. I've been an animal crazy person since I was a little kid, and I like animal stories that are both kind of realistic, that draw from the natural world, and also I like talking animal stories, like Richard Scarry, like these animals in suspenders, and so I enjoy both. And as of this year, I now have books kind of in both camps. In April, the month my baby was born, my first board book came out called Male Duck. I guess I'll show you.
Oh,
Male Duck. And that's my first talking animal story, where our little duck character, he's a mail carrier, and he's delivering packages to his friends throughout his little town. But that book has kind of a theme behind what's obvious there, which is really about gratitude and feeling grateful for the things that our community helpers do. In this case, our mail carrier, mail.
Very timely, considered everything
Yeah.
in the postal service. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course I was not anticipating that, so it was pretty timely time for it to come out. So yeah, I love animal stories, and I love themes that relate to kindness and gratitude and friendship. All of these kind of just like these heartwarming, feel good stories, and I like for my books to have a couple layers to them. So there's like the obvious top layer of like what's going on. Like Male Duck is actually a shape book, so it's
cool.
super simple. Male Duck's, first goes to Trudy's house. Trudy likes triangles. It's also a lift the flap book, so you can open it up, you can see inside Trudy's house. Her house is full of triangle shaped things. And Male Duck, each time he delivers a package, which again is the shape of that animal's favorite shape, you can also peek inside the package and see what the animal is receiving. So this on its face is a shape, a simple shape book, and there's lots of things to spot and find for toddlers. It's recommended for like the preschool age. But as you move on, so throughout the story, Male Duck is kind of speculating what's in each of the packages that the animals are receiving. And you can see, this is a fresh copy, so not all of them are. Omar likes ovals, and he's receiving a balloon. Male Duck is speculating, this one is light as a feather. And we keep going. So we're learning about all the different shapes. We return back to the post office, and we end with a double gatefold. And we see actually all of the friends that we met along the way are in the post office, and they're saying, thank you, Male Duck. There's bunting hanging up saying thank you. And you can see all of the items that they received in their packages are gifts or party supplies to celebrate and thank Male Duck for
I love that.
for what he does.
So yeah. That was your idea, like because you wanted to do a shape book. I mean, how does the process work?
So the shape part of that one, I actually developed the character Male Duck years ago, maybe 2015 or something, and I was on on Instagram back then, and I would post drawings of I really like to draw and develop characters, so I would post characters and things, and Male Duck got a lot of attention. A lot of people really liked Male Duck, and I had a friend who was working for the eventual publisher of Male Duck, Abrams. She was an art director there, and she would kind of reach out to me now and again and just say, hey, I think you should do something with Male Duck. And it kind of was like brewing in the back of my mind, but I wasn't really sure what to do with it. This is probably the book that's been, for me, in development the longest, because it's really just had this long period of just like, what could I do with that? And a couple of years ago, she reached out to me again and said, hey, we are looking for concept books for toddlers for the Abrams Appleseed imprint. So that's the imprint that does like preschool aged baby books. And she told me a couple different types of books that they were looking for. So a concept book is a book for kids that's that hinges on a specific simple concept, like a learning concept, like a counting book, an ABC book, a color book, shape book, etc. So she said, one of the types of concept books we're looking for right now is a shape book, and I think that you should consider doing Male Duck as a shape book. So that kind of got my wheels, turning. And that one ended up being a process that I developed in concert, like kind of in-house with the art director there and the editor there. We went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I would send manuscripts or drafts of manuscripts, as well as like little dummies or like little like thumbnail pages with, you know, ideas of how we might approach it. And then they would come back to me and say, well, this doesn't really work. Mail Duck was actually a rhyming manuscript for a long time, and I was like really kind of stuck in the rhyme thing. My other two books are rhyming books actually, but they kind of poo-pooed that, which is fine, and helped me kind of
break out.
Yeah. And I can't recall if they suggested we do a lift the flap or if I did. I can't recall, but that ended up being such a fun element to work with.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you have like what you see on the surface, but then this adds like so much interactivity to the book for like the little, you know, little readers. It of course made the book a little bit more complex to put together. Board books are usually shorter than typical picture books, but adding the lift the flap element to it ended up making it pretty much as long as any other picture book, because I had to illustrate the insides of all of these pieces and everything. And I have here, I thought it would be fun to show. This is the first draft dummy of Mail Duck. And the reason that we mocked it up like this, so you probably can't really see it because the drawings are actually in really light.
Like, leaning into the computer. Yeah. Oh, I can see. Yeah. Aw.
But the reason that we did, now I would advise any children's book, anyone trying to develop a children's book, to do something like this, even if they're just the author, not the illustrator, because this helps you work out pacing, page turns, length, just making sure that your story fits within a typical picture book page count. But this had an additional purpose, which was to figure out where the flaps would go and to make sure they didn't overlap on the pages. So like if this flap opened up in the same spot that the flap on the opposite side opened up, it would be a problem. So that was kind of, so that was like a mechanical thing that we had to work out, which was really fun. I mean, it was really, you know, it was really different from anything that I had worked on before. This is the little double doors in the back.
Oh, so cute. So Mail Duck basically was a drawing that you had on Instagram. And had you done a book before that? Like, because you're an illustrator, correct? Yeah. And then had you thought of writing children's books, or did Mail Duck lead you down this path?
So I always wanted to work on either books or products for kids, because kids stuff is, you know, kind of like my the aesthetic, you know, like I love cute, you know, I love cute stuff. I love animals. I love really simple, you know, artwork. And so even before I started with books, I knew that I wanted it to work in some kids product realm. So I started with an Etsy shop, actually.
Okay.
And I developed a bunch of like prints for children's rooms, some like artwork on little onesies for babies, cards, a little card line for like, you know, baby shower, birthday, things like that. So that's how I think I spent a good amount of time honing a style and an aesthetic that would be appropriate for a really young audience. I think before that, I was more kind of drawing things that were like comic-y and like not necessarily older, but just maybe a little bit more complicated than the kind of imagery that you would typically see in, you know, young children's stuff. And when people started to see, and I mean, now the illustration world is a pretty small world. Even, you know, the kids illustration world is an even smaller world, but like even within illustration, I would get feedback from other illustrators and from art directors saying like, hey, your stuff really, it suits this audience, this, you know, the preschool audience probably best. You know, I don't think I initially chose to, you know, work, you know, to create stuff for preschoolers necessarily, but I think it just happened that that's the kind of stuff that comes out when I draw. And, you know, and I had a lot of people gravitating toward it, being like, you know, I would love that for my, you know, 2-year-old's room, or I would, you know, something like that. So the way that I got my agent actually back in 2014 is similar to the Mail Duck story, in that this was on Twitter actually. I posted a character that I drew. It was actually a little hedgehog character. Mm-hmm. He was a hedgehog who was a cactus farmer. So like little spiky.
I love it.
And I posted that, and I happened to be following children's agents because, you know, at that time it was like kind of just a pipe dream, like wouldn't that be amazing if I could, you know, could bridge from kind of just doing these little jobs and like my own little shop to actually working, you know, in kids books. And I was following a few agents, and I'm guessing maybe one of these agents followed me back because I followed her. I'm not sure, but she sent me a message when she saw this character that I posted, and she was like, what is this little guy? Do you have a story for him? Like, do you have more? And I was like freaked out because I was like, oh my God, you know, I wasn't expecting to get any attention from an agent, you know, at that time. I didn't feel like I was there yet, you know? Yeah. And so like I told her a little bit about the character, and I said, I don't have a story right now, but I can develop one, you know, like, I don't know. Yeah. And so I spent a few weeks like writing a manuscript and working on, and also kind of developing some outlines for some additional story ideas. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just was like, you know, not gonna pass up a potential opportunity, you know? Yeah. So I sent it to her, and she went back and forth with me on the manuscript a little bit. And she was like, you know, I think this is really great. I think there's a lot of potential here. And I'd like to represent you. And that like blew my mind. And I think we sent that out. That was the first thing that we sent out. So basically like an agent will send out, if you're both author and illustrator, will send out like a manuscript and then a sample or a couple sample illustrations of what like the finished art would look like for a book, and like sketches for what the entire, you know. So we sent that out, and we got some positive feedback from editors. It was encouraging, but nobody was interested in it at that time, which was fine. I mean, usually the first thing you write or the first thing you develop does not land, you know. It's that's unusual. And to this day, I still haven't done anything with that character. And honestly, he's always in the back of my mind. I'm always like, what can I do with him? I still love that little guy.
He got you your agent.
Huh?
He got you your agent.
Yeah. And he just feels like a little friend who's like hanging around, you know. At some point, hopefully he'll materialize. But through that process, my agent added me to the agency's roster. So my agent is Jennifer Loughran of Andrea Brown Literary Agency. I don't want to just keep saying my agent, but she added me to the roster of the agency's illustrators. And in the meantime, you know, when the agency would get would be contacted by a publisher saying, hey, we need an illustrator for this project, they would pitch their illustrators. So around that time in 2014, even though nothing happened with my story, she was pitching me as an illustrator. So I did get a book project, my first, it's this little series with a publisher called Albert Whitman, called JP JP and the Giant Octopus. So this is a series of 4, which was super intimidating. That the first project I got was a series of 4 books. That was like crazy. But that kept me busy for a couple of years. That first book came out in 2015, and then the subsequent books came out later that year, and then in 2016. And during that time, I was, trying to develop ideas that I could also, or that we could then pitch as author illustrator. I was like schooling myself too, because I didn't go to school. I didn't go to art school. I didn't do a creative writing program. So I was basically like going to Barnes and Noble and sitting on the floor in the kids section and just reading everything, and just trying to figure out what would I do if I was going to do something, my own project. And it stuck with me when I was told by different art directors to try to stick when I was doing my own thing, to try to stick with the preschool age group, which was also kind of felt more approachable, because preschool books, tend to be shorter, simpler. That doesn't mean they're easier, but it felt like a more approachable kind of genre. So I was thinking, all right, well, what about concept? Let's think about concept books. Like I said before, it's things like counting, ABCs, shapes, blah, blah. And sometimes concept books they end up being like a list, so like an ABC book is like A is for apple, B is for boy, and it seems like it would be difficult to pitch something like that to like what would be original about it, So I was like trying to come up with a way to keep it simple, still do a concept, but something had to be special about it, or clever or unique or something about it. So I knew that being the animal person, I knew that I would want to do some animal thing. And I especially love dogs, like many people. And I have a soft spot for shelter dogs and rescue dogs. My own dog, Russell, came from a rescue, and he was my whole world for, over a decade. So I got this idea. I was living in California at the time, and I remember like walking down the street and seeing some people walking the opposite direction, walking their little scruffy dogs. I actually don't remember if I was walking Russell or if I was just walking somewhere, but I was thinking of how I could do a picture book about shelter dogs without it being like pedantic or something. I don't want it to be like adopt a dog, like you don't want, especially for like little kids, you're not trying to drive home like an intense, message or anything, but I still was like trying to think of a way that I could do something about shelter dogs.
Yeah.
And I was thinking counting, we could count the dogs, like, okay, maybe we're counting the dogs in the shelter. And I'm like, okay, but that could also be sad. Like, wow, there's a lot of dogs in the shelter, and then it occurred to me that we could count up the shelter dogs, and then we get to a certain moment where the dogs are meeting their people. Aww. And we start to count backwards as the dogs are leaving the shelter.
Getting adopted. Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole, the concept or the structure of that just like came to me, felt like full-fledged as I was like walking down the street. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna, try to do. And I went home and I actually made, I like to use like grid paper and make little thumbnails, so I can get like a bird's eye view of everything. Yeah. And because it was a simple counting book, and because I had this idea for the counting up and counting down, I knew that I would have to be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and be at a certain point because of page length, restrictions. I knew that I'd have to be at a certain point at a certain page count, and then going down. And then from there, I had to, you know, come up with the text, which in this case ended up being very simple. And for me, the fun part is drawing all the dogs, of course. But that turned into Found Dogs, which is that was my first picture book as author and illustrator.
Oh, I love it. And I love that it's animals too, because any kid can relate to that.
Yeah.
You know?
And it is set in the shelter. And of course that's, you know, so like on our title page, we see the little shelter. There's a little kid sitting there waiting to meet his friends.
And I love the title, Found Dogs.
Thank you. Yeah. And then the text is very simple. It's just, I actually had originally like some opening text, but they didn't want that. We just started right out with one dog, long and low. And we go through all of our little guys. This is one of my favorite pages because I love greyhounds, and then our little Dalmatians and spotty dogs over here. Slobbering hounds. And then we get to the middle of the book, and it says, wait dogs a little longer. And then we see the kind of a cityscape here. There's our shelter again, and we see all of the people are lining up to meet their friends. It says, soon dogs, you'll be found. And then it's the same dogs again, of course, but we're also meeting the people and we're counting backwards. So it's 10 dogs saying hello, 9 dogs ready to go. And so we, you know, we count that. Yeah. So that book, when the structure of that book, when I worked that out, the rest fell into place.
Yeah.
You know, like it, honestly, like I haven't really had that experience again. Everything else that I've tried to write or written has been a lot more like pulling teeth than that one. But it was a really great first experience in, you know, publishing and working, you know, as both an author and illustrator. And, you know, I just love that book. So.
Who are some of your favorite children's books authors?
Oh, well, I mean, this is not super original at all. It's probably many people's favorite. Maurice Sendak has been one of my favorites forever. And he's also, I mean, okay, by saying this, I'm not in any way comparing myself to him. Not even, you know, he is an author illustrator, you know, he worked for decades and decades and decades, and his work is incredible. I mean, I think I initially was drawn to his illustration style, which is so delicate and so like mature in a way. You know, it's not anything like the bubbly, cutesy stuff I do. It's very like sophisticated, but it's just gorgeous. And then I love, like I mentioned, kind of like these little talking animal books, which like kind of like Richard Scarry.
I raised my daughter on both those books.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love all of that. I love old school stuff like that. You know, then again, the contemporary picture book world is a whole nother thing, and it's incredible. It's, you know,
with digital art coming in, because you're line drawing, right? You're hand drawing yours.
So most of my work is hand drawn. Well, everything is hand drawn. The finished artwork in Found Dogs was drawn in ink, actually mostly using brushes for the line work. But with everything I do, I scan in my line work and then color it digitally. Sometimes I also scan in like pieces of drawings and compose the drawings themselves digitally. It just depends on, you know, it tends to make things more editable than if I was, I really, really admire illustrators who today are still working fully in analog, you know, like painting at the desk. But my experience working on, you know, in both, you know, like commercial illustration and books is that there are often so many edits upon edits.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how you do it if you're completing a finished painting, for instance, you know what I mean? Other than like redoing the painting over and over again. So doing the process kind of like having one foot in analog and one foot in digital allows me a lot of flexibility to change things as I go. So both Found Dogs and my most recent book, Can We Be Friends? This was also drawn in ink. I used brushes, and I also used nib pens, which is like the little, like the pen that you dip in like a vat of ink, which was kind of new for me, but similar process for Found Dogs. And then Male Duck, when I was first developing Male Duck, my plan was to do it this way, where I drew everything in ink. But around the same time, I was starting to do some illustrations fully digitally. I would still do all of my sketches on paper. I mean, everything I do on paper first, scan in the sketches, and then do all of the color, and if there's any line work, do that digitally, but sometimes there's not line work. And the publisher of Male Duck saw some of that stuff that I was doing, and they liked it more for Male Duck. So I wasn't anticipating working fully digitally before Male Duck came out, really. Not in books anyway, but that's, you know, they were like, let's try it. And I actually really like how it came out. Like, I think that it's still my style, but it's a different feel, you know, and a slightly different aesthetic.
My daughter is an illustrator, and she
is
recently moved. She recently moved to, thank you. She recently moved to digital, and it's like insane. Like, I'll see patterns on these shirts because she's really into anime right now. So that's kind of a lot of that, which is very common for nerdy teenage girls in our world. And she had this like shirt, and I'm looking at it, and it looks like it was like a pattern that she just recreated, but she had hand drawn every little, and just like had made it. That's what's nice about digital. You can make it bigger, and then she drew a driver's license that was in this guy's car visor. So when you see it, it's like very detailed in the final image, but I'm like, how did you get that? And she's like, well, I just blew it up, and then it was just like she taught herself to create in like a couple months. And I was just like, to be that young, because you learn so fast and easily and retain stuff. It's like,
I mean, that's the generation now. I think a lot of kids are skipping drawing on paper altogether and drawing on iPads and Procreate and stuff, which is, I mean, you know, it's great. You know, I mean,
she's got skills in both. She's doing the cover of the poetry book, and I wouldn't
want you to miss out on the experience of all of the analog stuff, but you know, digital is kind of where it's at right now. But I think people sometimes have the misconception that like, oh, it's digital art, so you didn't really draw it or something.
Oh no, she's drawing it. Like she's enlarging the image and doing the details with her finger and hand. I mean, right.
So there's nothing not, you know, because people will be like, well, is it hand drawn? It's like, yes, my hand is drawing it. My hand, but I just happen to be drawing on a screen, you know, instead of on a piece of paper. So I mean, it takes going either route.
So what would be what? Oh, did you have something else? One more question, and we'll have you share your work. What would be like your holy grail piece of advice for somebody that wanted to do what you're doing?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go in two directions. One is because there's so many people who want to write children's books, and they might not be illustrators or artists, which is fine. I mean, that's, you know, there's still a huge market for just children's book authors.
That's what Rob Sanders is, correct?
Rob Sanders, yes. And actually, I'm in Rob Sanders' critique group. He helped me, he and the other members of our critique group helped me work on Can We Be Friends and Male Duck. So they saw iterations of that. I think a lot of people, they are eager to just get something out there and get so attached to like that first manuscript or something, like, and I think you just have to not feel so precious about any one story, with children's books. You just, the best thing you can do is study what's out there now. I know a lot of people, like I said, I was inspired by like Maurice Sendak, but books today the books that are coming out today aren't quite like the books that he created in like the 50s and 60s and 70s, So to study books that are coming out today, like do that thing that I did. Well, if you can also, it's a little bit trickier with COVID, but try to get your hands on as many contemporary picture books in the subgenre that you're interested in. Yeah. So like if you want to write nonfiction, try to get your hands on as many contemporary nonfiction picture books and just study them, like consider them like mentor texts. If you find one that you really like how it's done, you can develop a few manuscripts, kind of like, don't copy it, but like understand, how that author paced the story, how the plot is developing, use it as a mentor, in your own writing process. And don't expect that first thing you write or the first couple things you write to, be the one that's going to get picked up, because it probably won't. But that doesn't mean that, at some point, something that you write, especially as you, school yourself more and hone your craft, so that's one thing that advice would go for authors alone and author illustrators. And also if someone is just an author, a lot of people like get obsessed with the idea of like who's going to illustrate their story. Yeah. And so before they even seek out like industry feedback or like, not even critique. I mean, getting critique group feedback is invaluable, but then there are a lot of ways in the children's book world to also seek out industry feedback. You can join, I really recommend joining this organization called SCBWI. It's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And it's an international organization that connects writers and illustrators with industry professionals through conferences, through, all different, sometimes contests. I was gonna say contests are a sketchy thing, but, there are all these avenues where you can submit your work to be reviewed by editors, by agents, by, other like published authors, doing all of these things before, either A, trying to send your work to a publisher, or B, becoming obsessed with the idea of hiring an illustrator. Yeah. It's not even something that a writer needs to really be concerned with. If you are seeking traditional publication with an actual, like with a traditional publisher and not self-publishing, then an author does not need to hire an illustrator, doesn't need to worry about that. The number one way in which they have to worry about the illustrator is when developing your manuscript, when developing your story. The best thing to do, or what, an important thing to do, is to think about the ways that you're making room or leaving room for the illustrator. Yeah. So don't use up your word count. Like most picture books published today are 500 words or less. Okay. So don't suck up your word count with like all this description when you know that the illustrator, that's really the illustrator's job.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, leaving room for an illustrator, and then not concerning yourself with who the illustrator might be if you're seeking traditional publication. Those are
Don't they match you to an illustrator? Don't they match you to an illustrator?
Yeah, the publisher will, if a publisher acquires your manuscript and you're an author, they will match you with an illustrator. Sometimes they'll probably send you a couple illustrators and say, hey, do any of these resonate with you, or do they feel right for your story? Or they might not. I've heard of both. Once you've done a few, like I know that Rob Sanders, I think he was on his like 9th or 10th book that was being published when his publisher actually asked him if he had any preference for who might illustrate his next book. And he said they'd never asked me that before. And he actually got his pick that time. So which doesn't always happen, of course, but so leaving room for the illustrator, and I would, really take advantage of all of the resources that SCBWI provides. I mean, it is a membership-based organization, so I think you pay like $80 a year or something like that. But one thing that's actually really cool about COVID, nothing's cool about COVID.
They were virtual.
Everything is virtual this year. Yeah, so normally SCBWI has 2 international conferences a year, and one takes place in New York and one takes place in LA. And I've been to the LA conference. It blew my mind. It was amazing. But this year, a lot of it's cost prohibitive for a lot of people, and a lot of people can't travel even under normal circumstances. So this year, all of SCBWI's programming is virtual. So if you join SCBWI this year, you'll have access to all of this stuff that you even wouldn't necessarily have in a typical year.
Yeah. My cousin wrote a book for middle school students, and I'm like, do you know this organization? And I go, well, look, like the conference is like next week and it's online. And he lives in New York City, so it would have worked, but I was like, this is awesome, like you can like dive right in like next week, like 70 bucks, I don't know what it was, like $100. And
it was affordable. It was pretty affordable. The physical, like the actual conferences are kind of pricey, but the virtual. And I will say also, SCBWI has regional chapters everywhere in the world, and the Tampa Bay chapter here is quite active, and we have workshops and smaller scale conferences. They do a conference in Orlando and in Miami, and they bring industry professionals to those conferences too. I mean, big, name art directors and editors are at these smaller regional conferences to, find talent that, because talent can be anywhere. So yeah, it's definitely worth.
You gave us like so much good information. Thank you so much. Do you want to share you've already shared some work. Do you want to share your book, your current book? All right. Sure. She's going to share the screen with you. So you're going to get a reading of a children's book.
I think we'll read Can We Be Friends?
Yeah.
This is actually my first nonfiction picture book. So all of these stories are based in fact. And I actually developed this through the critique group process with Rob and my other critique group members. Rob has written a lot of nonfiction picture books for kids, and it kind of got me thinking what I might do.
I have one of Rob's books, right?
Oh, yes.
I know. This is beautiful. This book, there was not Sunlit. We didn't have Sunlit Festival this year, but the year before, we had an event at the Studio 620, and the illustrator came, and it was the first time they had met.
Jamie,
they had never even met. This book is so beautiful. The illustration.
So that was a very heartwarming event.
Yes, that was wonderful.
And I have another of his books here. The Fighting.
I know. It's like Rob.
But anyway, so Rob helped me with this one, and so I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna share.
If you have kids, bring them in, because then they're gonna hear the story. Yeah. All right.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so then I don't have to. All right. Can we be friends? Actually, this is the dedication page. And as you can see, I dedicated this one to, it says, for my friends, Rob, Candy, Julie, and Candace, and they are my critique group members.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. Can you be friends with somebody who is very different and not at all like you? Let's see. My shell is my house. I'm 100 or more. I like the calm, quiet hush of the forest floor. And that's our tortoise speaking over here. I'm big all around, but I'm still a calf. I make a loud, rowdy ruckus when I take a bath. Our little hippo guy speaking over here. Can we be friends? Yes, please. And I'm gonna open to, my little mini thumbnail is in the way here. But okay, so the way that I set up this book, we have our little verses where we introduce the animals who are quite different, and then we're asking the question, can they be friends? And then we have a page here, and this is basically nonfiction information. It's the backstory to this animal friendship. So after a tidal wave hit Kenya, Africa, baby hippo Owen couldn't find his family. But soon he was rescued and moved to a nearby forest sanctuary. There, a very old giant tortoise named Mzee became his friend. The two foraged and ate together, waded in the water together, and napped in the sun together. Like a true friend, Mzee helped Owen grow into a big, strong, happy hippopotamus. In fact, within a few years, Owen grew to be much larger than his tortoise companion.
Wow.
And I'll mention that on my website, I have photos and videos of the actual animals behind stories.
They're true stories. They're true stories. Oh, I love that.
Yep. All right, here's our second pair. My coat is spotted and I need to run. I'm shy. I shiver when I meet someone. My fur is golden and I love to chew. I wag, wiggle, bark when I see someone new. Can we be friends? You bet. At a zoo in Virginia, Kumbali the cheetah cub was the runt of the litter. Zookeepers had to bottle feed the baby and teach him how to be a big cat. Kumbali felt unsure and longed for a friend. At a nearby animal shelter, puppy Kago was feeling the same way. So the zookeepers decided to bring the cub and the puppy together. When Kago arrived, he was so playful, and just like a cheetah, he loved to run. Kumbali and Kago became fast friends and live together at the zoo to this day.
Aww.
So these two are at the Metro Richmond Zoo in Virginia. If anybody ever ends up there, they should go see these guys.
Oh, how cool.
And our next pair.
Yes.
My trunk collects water to squirt and spray. My feet stomp, stomp when I run and play. My fleece is fluffy. I'm woolly and white. I ba ba bounce on my hooves so light. Can we be friends? Of course. At a South Africa sanctuary, an elephant calf named Temba wanted a friend, but there were no other elephants around. One day, his caretakers introduced Albert the sheep, and after a rocky first visit, they became best buddies. They did everything together except take baths. Elephants love water, but sheep do not like to get wet. True story. This is a famous one. It's almost bedtime, so I build a nest. I sign, sleep now, Coco, settle down and rest. It's dark outside now. We find a warm spot. We snore, snuggle, purr, wake up, spar, and swat. So we've got our gorilla over here and 5 little kittens. Can we be friends? Certainly. Coco the gorilla was born in a California zoo. Her caretaker, Penny, knew gorillas were very smart. Penny brought Coco to live with her at a research center called the Gorilla Foundation. She taught Coco sign language so she could understand her better. Using her signs, Coco asked Penny for a kitten. Over the years, Coco adopted several kitten friends, including All Ball, Smokey, Ms. Gray, Lips, and Ms. Black. She named them herself. At bedtime, Coco built herself a comfy nest out of blankets, towels, and other soft things. Kittens can sleep anywhere, but Coco's kittens love to join her for a nap in her nest.
Oh. She named the cats, the kittens.
Yep, using her signs. Pretty crazy. There's a lot of videos of Coco and her kittens and her, love that one. All right, this is the final friendship here.
Mm.
I walk on the land. I dig and I chase. My paws pitter-patter from place to place. I swim in the sea. I soar and I sail. I swoosh, splish, splash with the turn of my tail. Pages. Can we be friends? Yes, please. In Ireland, a dog named Ben jumps into the ocean every day to swim and play with Doogie, a wild bottlenose dolphin. If Ben swims too long or too far and gets tired, Doogie gives him a ride back to shore. What a great friend.
Oh my God, I love this. I love it.
Also really sweet videos of these two.
Oh, and I love it. Oh.
And we wrap up with, whose friend will you be?
Oh. And I love the little girl, little beautiful girl.
All her potential buddies.
I know, I love it.
And then I guess the final spread of this book, which was really fun for me, is I got to include back matter in this book again because this is nonfiction. So we have a little glossary.
That's awesome.
Sources, and there's some links to videos and stuff in there. And I will say that this book is for a bit of a wider audience than my other books. This can be read to preschoolers, but also to a little bit older audience. What I think is kind of nice about this is that the little verses they're pretty simple and can be read and understood by like the preschool audience. And you can totally read this book by skipping over or just summarizing the nonfiction information. But this is also a book that's nice for like little families that have like a little kid and an older kid.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So you've got, it's a little bit more adaptable, I guess, to more readers. So.
And it helps them. I'm going to go to the big screen now. Or you can, let's see, how do we get it? Here we go. Good job. I think what's great about that book also, like your books, it helps them to appreciate the natural world, which we need to be raising empathetic, conscious children that, realize it's not just about them because, humans are the biggest threat to this planet.
It's scary. Yeah.
Oh, Erica, thank you. You gave so much information and you gave a lot of your time. And I think this is so helpful for people that want to write children's books, either illustrate or both. And you gave resources, and thank you so much. And I know you're a working mother, so thanks for taking time away from your lovely baby, and appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much for asking me, because my world lately has been, of course, so wonderful, my little babe, but it's nice to take a little break and talk about books and writing and illustrating. So thank you.
So we'll include links for Erica where you can get her books. And thank you so much for joining us for episode 29 of Typewriter Talks. We will be back next Tuesday with episode 30. It's crazy.
Wow.
And we are Keep St. Pete Lit. We are a literary arts organization, as I said, based in St. Petersburg, Florida. And you can go to our website, keepstpetelit.org. We have writing classes, book clubs, poetry open mics, all kinds of stuff going on for the community. Erica, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.